This is RJ Eskow, and we are back with Take Action News. Thanks so much for sticking with us. Our next guest is Alexis Goldstein. She is a writer and strategist who specializes in financial and Wall Street issues. She's been affiliated with the Occupy movement, with the other 98%, and she does a great job. Alexis, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as we've been doing all day today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the year that just ended and the year we're looking forward to. How do you think 2013, I have my own opinions, but how do you think 2013 was as a year for Wall Street reform? How would you grade it on a scale of A to F?
I mean, I think that there's a couple of bright spots, so I wouldn't give it an F, but I think it's probably somewhere in the range of a D. I mean, I think we continue to see too big to jail to be a very real factor. We continue to see a number of fines that have been levied at a number of large financial institutions. I mean, I can kind of go through a sort of checklist month to month, if you like, at some point. But I think that we continue to see that the American people wants to see punishment for the crimes of 2008 and after, and the people in power do not have the appetite to do that. So I think that we're looking at a D.
Well, it's interesting because when I wrote about the year, I said something about green shoots, that it was a grim year, but there were little green shoots here and there. We can talk about whether you see green shoots too, but let's talk about too big to jail for a second.
Sure.
We are... That's certainly been the case. We even had the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, declare that institutions like HSBC, which has been implicated in laundering drug money, more than implicated, I would say,
Yeah.
that they that you can't send anybody to jail there for this kind of outrageous crime, which involves colluding with the Mexican drug cartels that have brutally and savagely tortured and murdered perhaps 65,000 people, that you can't do anything about that because it represents a systemic threat to the global economy, were that institution to be endangered. Here's the part I don't understand, even in their thinking, and maybe you can help me with this, because we can't resist their thinking until we understand it better. I don't understand why throwing a couple executives from HSBC into the clink has to inevitably endanger HSBC as an institution.
I think that you're asking absolutely the right question. I think that we have to sort of take a step back and think about who are the people in the circle of influence that are talking to these decision makers, that are talking to the Obama administration, that are talking to the people at the Department of Justice. And that answer to that question is largely people that are either in Wall Street or closely affiliated with Wall Street, that profit from Wall Street. And they have essentially convinced these decision makers that they have a gun to their head, and that if you send even one top level executive to jail and make them sit in prison for a decade or so, that you will kill finance as we know it. And their favorite example to point to is Enron and Arthur Andersen. And they essentially, brought criminal charges against the firm Arthur Andersen, and Arthur Andersen ceased to exist. And so that's, I suppose, the fear, is that if you throw just one high-ranking, executive in jail, no one will want to be an executive at these big banks. These big banks will, start to crumble, and there will be instability. And that is obviously to the benefit of the people that are at these institutions. And unfortunately, those are the people who are in the circles surrounding the people in power. If you look at the economic advisors to President Obama, they largely look the same as the economic advisors to President Clinton. And he oversaw a huge amount of deregulation. So they basically hoodwinked them and made them afraid enough that they believe this lie that if you punish us, the system will be unsafe and the system will be unstable. And you are better off pretending that everything is okay, and maybe you'll get some growth and lower unemployment, and you'll, get to continue to elect Democrats to office. And I think you're right. I think if you throw a couple people in jail, the industry is not going to collapse overnight. And to the extent that the industry changes, it would be changing for the better, because a huge amount of their profits right now are coming from basically squeezing pennies out of the already, stretched American sort of lower and middle class. They're squeezing pennies out of people by giving them these horrible bait and switch rates on on mortgages. They're squeezing pennies out of people by, not paying them high enough wages, so they have to take out so much debt, and then they're, charging them huge amounts of interest rates on their credit cards. But the people in power believe the lies that the sort of Wall Street lobbyists and their crew are telling them. And so they're just afraid of creating instability.
So they're afraid of course, I got hung up for a minute there when you said it would end the financial system as we know it, trying to figure out what the downside of that outcome would be.
That's right.
But look, so you have a system essentially where the business model is predicated on cheating, I guess was a fair way to put it. Let me give you another example. Jamie Dimon, at least he's no longer being lionized as the president's favorite banker or the best banker on Wall Street or the honest one or the good one. But here's a guy who went before his own investors. There was something called the London Whale, well, where they lost, you can tell me the final number, 6.2 billion, something like that, on a trade that they attempted to conceal. And Jamie Dimon, the CEO, the very popular CEO of, in certain circles, of J.P. Morgan Chase, said to his investors on a phone call that this was nothing more than a tempest in a teapot, when we learned later he already had reports showing that the losses were running into the billions. Now, there is securities law and fraud law, which on at least a superficial reading would suggest that that was a fraudulent statement. Why is it inconceivable to think that Jamie Dimon might be either sued or prosecuted for committing fraud against investors in his bank?
That's also a great question, and I think that there's even a more specific way that Jamie Dimon could be brought and see criminal charges brought against him, which is a very specific law called Sarbanes-Oxley, which came in the wake of Enron and basically insists that the CEO attest that their internal controls are okay, and that they basically have a handle on what is going on at their firm, and they have to sign on the dotted line and swear that that is the case. And so a number of people, including David Dayen, who writes at the New Republic, and also for Salon, have said, listen, it seems to us that Jamie Dimon is guilty of violating Sarbanes-Oxley, because there was this very large report that came out by the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations about the London Whale. It was hundreds of pages long, and it documented over and over again the fact that upper-level management all the way up to Dimon knew that these problems were in place, knew that the traders were deliberately lying about these trades, doing things as dodgy as basically cheating regulations and kind of cooking their books, so to speak, so that they didn't have to hold as much capital. And my favorite part of that report that came out was that there was a quant, which is kind of like there are these ex-physicists who then get jobs on Wall Street and, write complex formulas and try to figure out the price of assets. So they're sort of like nerdy types who have found a way to make a ton of money, and they call them quants. And so there's this quant who figures out a way to game a certain regulation, and he lays it all out in this email, and he's like, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. And upper-level management, they didn't come in and say, whoa, that's not legal, we shouldn't be doing this. Upper-level management came in, and they reamed the guy out because he put it in an email. And they were like, we want to do what you said. And this comes out of phone transcripts that the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation found. So basically, this is the culture of Wall Street. We want you to break the law, but we want you to be careful and don't document it and don't put it in an email and don't be so stupid as to leave a paper trail. And so I think you're absolutely asking the right question. I think Jamie Dimon should be facing criminal charges for the London Whale and probably for a host of other things. That is only one thing that they did wrong in the last year. They manipulated electricity markets in California and were actually banned from trading electricity for 6 months by an energy regulator. They had to shut down. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Don't leave out the whistleblower who said that they knew about Bernie Madoff's crimes when they were handling his money for years, and argues that they concealed it, and no one seems to be investigating that. Let me wrap up. We could talk if we start talking about specific bank crimes, we could go on all day. But let me wrap up with a final question to you, Alexis, which is, people are out there, they're frustrated, they see bankers cheating, lying, breaking the law, making a lot of money, they're trying to get by. What can people do? We had the Occupy movement. People feel that it faded. Just in a few seconds, what can people do to fight back against this banking system and try to restore some justice?
So I would suggest two things, or maybe three, and it depends. If you would like to get involved in the political system and push the lever in that sense, it's really important for elected officials to feel heat anytime that they vote with Wall Street. And I try to document any new bill that's coming across on my blog, which is called becausefinanceisboring.com. And so things like writing op-eds in your local paper actually make a real difference. If you're less interested in the political lever and more interested in just what you can do as an individual, you can move your money. You can take your money out of these institutions, put it in a credit union, put it in a local bank, and make them feel the pain just in a monetary perspective. And then a third thing that you can do is you can look into totally alternative economies. So one example of that is an organization called the Working World, and they're basically an incubator for worker-owned co-ops. So it's almost like they're a venture capitalist that's not evil. And they take money, they loan it to this startup worker-owned co-op, and they don't charge them any interest, and they don't ask for any of their money back until they're profitable. And the minute they're
profitable, I didn't know about that. That sounds terrific. So
yeah,
thanks
great.
so much. I hope you'll come back and talk more about some of these solutions. And finance may be boring, but everybody loves crime, and this is a crime story too. So, Alexis Goldstein, thanks so much for coming and talking with us on We Act Radio.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. This is RJ Eskow. We'll be right back with more of Take Action News.